Very good morning, everyone who's joining us, and thank you for joining today's Inclusive Insights session. I think we must be being May. We're probably on session 16, 17 of these now. Inclusive Insights started in January 2025, and we typically do one a month. There are occasions where we do more, and occasionally where we kind of skip depending on if attendance is low. Today's session is going to be a little bit different though. This isn't going to be a lecture about why accessibility matters. Most of you, if you're going to join this session on Global Accessibility Awareness Day, most of you already know that. Today, what we're going to be looking at is what happens next. So Global Accessibility Awareness Day is a powerful moment. It's celebrated kind of around the world. You might, if you are active on your social medias, you may see that some people aren't necessarily celebrating today. That might be due to kind of leadership in their country, things that are going on, areas of discrimination, and ultimately, even if you are celebrating or you're just joining out of curiosity, today is not the end of the work. Things don't end on accessibility awareness, global accessibility awareness day. This should be very much the start. What it should be though is a chance to pause, notice what is changing, and celebrate useful progress. And when we hear what we're doing, what others are doing, we can hear about the process, learn about the process, and decide what we do next. So uh, the tone of today's session should be simple. We're not here to shame organisations. We're not going to be calling any organisation out for not doing anything about Global Accessibility Awareness Day. This isn't about perfection. In fact, one of the mantras to Accessible Me very much is this notion of progress over perfection. And whether you are quite high on your accessibility journey or high on the accessibility ladder, or you're yet to take your first step, hopefully we can give you some tools to help you get started. This also isn't about pretending everyone is at the same stage. So we're here to learn from each other and leave with hopefully one or two clear next steps. Before we get going, if anyone wants to pop one word in the chat, I'd love to kind of hear how accessibility feels in your organization right now. Just one word, or don't feel restricted to that. If it's one or two or three, that's absolutely fine. Some of you may feel it's early or growing. Some people might feel it's kind of messy, inconsistent, or not yet. Some of you may say it's structured or not structured. Some of you maybe feel hopeful, kind of is urgent, with ADA Title II of the Americans with Disability Act in the United States. You've got the European Accessibility Act in effect here in Europe, which does affect the UK. So I can see, Annabelle, you're feeling hopeful and growing, which is fantastic. And Radwa, if you are here today, or Sai or Olivia, Nicole, feel free to pop in. But if you're just here listening, that's also absolutely fine. What excites me about things like hopeful and growing, these are useful because they show something important, and that's kind of accessibility doesn't feel the same in every organization. So let's anchor today around kind of three simple questions, and I'll talk more to what those are in just a moment. We're going to come back to these a couple of times today throughout the session. So first and foremost, what did we notice? This might be something your organization has done well. It might be a gap you started. Some of you may be consultants or developers, or you might care about accessibility. So it might be you've gone onto a website to book maybe travel, and Olivia may touch on that in the later session. It may have been you've booked tickets to something, or you've gone into a store and you've spotted either you've struggled yourself with narrow aisleways through and not being able to get a wheelchair or a scooter through. It might be you find it unclear, maybe the contrast was poor, or maybe you've seen something done really, really well. What would be nice is conversation around kind of that something has happened, or that something needs to happen. Do feel free to keep on typing in chat, and if you do want to speak today, feel free to use that raise hand feature, and I'll invite you to speak on audio as well. The second question today will be what has changed. Ultimately, once awareness, awareness on its own can be valuable, but awareness is only really good if that leads to a change in behaviour. if it leads to progress, if it leads to kind of content design or decision making, doing something different. There's nothing worse than an organization or a company knowing is potentially excluding people or discriminating against people and doing nothing about it. And this is something when I speak to leaders in several organizations, where they say, I'm almost too scared to do anything on the accessibility front because when it comes to CEO leadership or level, especially in these large multinational organizations, if I say something wrong, that suddenly becomes newsworthy. So, it's easier to say nothing. And this is where I want to come back to that mantra of progress over perfection and doing something positive. So I can see an example in the chat here from Simon. Thank you so much for sharing. When I have a chat with any professional from another domain and share about accessibility, for them it's something out of the world. It's something out of the world, and where and nowhere near something they've witnessed any time. And for a lot of organizations, I'd say that's true as well. Sometimes I liken accessibility to a bit of a kind of a metaphoric Trojan horse. They think accessibility is this kind of big beast heading towards their fortress, and it intimidates them. And one of the things I would say is that accessibility doesn't have to be that. We can be Trojan mice in an organization, or kind of do kind of silent accessibility. And if each and every one of us makes incremental changes, those changes can have the same ripple effect in an organization and really drive positive change. Third and final question is, what are we going to do next? And that kind of what are we doing next is potentially the most important question of today. So by the end of today's sessions, I want everyone to kind of have one practical answer to that question. You don't have to have it now, but just think about the things that we cover. So let's just get a quick reaction in the chat to which of these three questions feels most useful for your organization at the moment. Number one, what did we notice? Number two, what changed? And number three, what are we doing next? And again, I'll give you a couple of minutes to finish typing if you wish to. So again, if you're not sure, you can absolutely take that time. There's no pressure here. One of the things I would say about these three questions is they matter because GAAD, or Global Accessibility Awareness Day, is often treated like the finish line. And you see that with other events like this throughout the year as well. During Neurodiversity Week, Purple Pound Day, Black History Month, you see organisations maybe change their logo. They might do a post about it. But what about the other kind of 364 days out of the year, which aren't these days, where things aren't happening? So we see that as differently. Accessibility is something we should all be doing each and every day. And the reason for that is actually, if I just take a moment to look at the chat. So question one, noticing what's working well, as it might not be starting from scratch, which is absolutely right, and enabling something to build on. So yeah, I think a lot of organizations are doing good things. And one of the troubles I see time and time again is they aren't necessarily speaking around what we're doing. So if you own a restaurant and you have an accessible menu, if you're running an event and you've made you have a quiet room that you didn't have the last couple of years, or you've made certain provisions, make sure your social media communicates that. Make sure your website lets people know. Time and time again, when we work with organizations, there are members in the team or maybe initiatives that great things have happened, and celebrate that. If nothing else, use Global Accessibility Awareness Day to go, hey, this is something we have done. We recognize it might not yet be perfect, but please give us a feedback. When we come back and do this again next year, this is hopefully one of the things that's changed. So now to answer the questions, they all matter. So that's wonderful to hear. One of the risks with awareness days is that they can become a single moment, as I've already noticed. It can be just a post on the social media, a logo change, maybe a webinar. I know there's an irony of me mentioning webinars here, delivering one today, but this is part of a wider thing we do here at Access4Me. And it might also be a campaign. And whilst none of those things are bad, they're not the goal. The real value of things like Global Accessibility Awareness Days is that they give us a checkpoint, a reason to ask what is working already, what's missing, and what we need to build into everyday work. So the question ultimately isn't really about did we do something for Global Accessibility Awareness Day, yay, or perhaps no. A better question is what will still be different next month or the month after or 2 months from now? Let's say end of summer. So what will be different because GAAD happened? So feel free to pop a yes in or no into the chat if you feel comfortable in doing so, or if you prefer to make your own notes as well, that's absolutely fine. Did your organisation do anything for GAAD this year, or the organisations you work with, perhaps? I do want to kind of caveat that there is no judgment here either way. So not doing something yet is still useful information. It tells you where the next opportunity is. So don't feel bad if you haven't done anything in your organisation. Hopefully today we can give you some pointers on some of the areas you can be doing. And let's make that more specific then. So what did your organisation actually do? Like you might have had a plan. Did that plan materialize? Did you make that post? Did you deliver that webinar? Did you have that internal employee meeting? Maybe a follow-up on neurodiversity week or month last month? What have you done? And more importantly, what are you planning to do next? And this is where we move from kind of general awareness into real activity. So different organizations might be at different stages. Some of you will have posted externally, as I've already mentioned. And again, I see you kind of quite frequently as just one example, and I hope you don't mind me calling you out here, of engaging on your Facebook groups, what and asking the question, welcome to the group, tell us a bit about what you're doing and what challenges you have. And I think these things are fantastic. And if anyone is here today, the idea is to kind of just to celebrate things like that. Some of you might have run internal sessions, which is something I absolutely hear quite a lot. We have an employee resource group, an ERG, and they might be doing some sessions on a Friday, an end of week thing, or show and tell. That might be neurodiversity groups. It might be other areas, for other areas, other communities. It may even be on aspects of intersectionality. So you may have a prominent trans community, or and some of those may have disabilities as well. So how do other areas of the protected characteristics come into effect? It might be gender, race, religion. All of these things matter. Even down to things like our own backgrounds, our lived experience, the wealth we have in family, and whether or not we were able to afford to go to university and have these differences. Some of you may have reviewed content or a process. So, and if you haven't reviewed yet, stay tuned. We can talk more about what that could look like in the session. Some of you might be planning to take action after GAAD, and if you are doing that, please feel free to pop into the chat or the comments if you're watching on YouTube. What that may look like. And as I noted earlier, some of you may not have started, and all of those are very valid places to be. What matters is about being honest about where you are, because that can help you choose to step in the right direction. And welcome to yourself and you as well. I do hope I pronounced your name right. And I appreciate you joining us and listening in. Not seeing any further comments in the chat at the moment, so and that can be normal. We are slightly quieter than we perhaps expected to be today, and that's fine. But what I would say is some communication, some internal activity, some planned next steps, and some people working out where to begin. This is all normal, and there might be a mix of where you are. Just in the interest of time, then what we're going to move on to next is what action could actually look like. Because action doesn't necessarily need to be huge to be useful. If I take an example of if you have something color coded, maybe you can get a sheet of stickers, or you can review the CSS or to do something where you can add patterns or symbols. And those of you following my socials, you might have seen I recently bought things like Braille Uno. The lovely things about the Braille Uno is they have Braille which recognize the color of the card and the number of the card on the corners, but they've actually taken steps to consider color blindness as well. So they have different shapes to denote the color. I also did a similar example with the Rubik's Cube. when we talk about action, ultimately we don't necessarily mean fixing everything immediately. And this is again where a lot of organizations simply freeze. They hear we need to do something about accessibility, we need to make our website accessible. They look up the web content accessibility guidelines, see the kind of 80 plus criteria, and they just panic. So this isn't about kind of getting to WCAG or Web Content Accessibility Guidelines level 2.2 or 2.1 AAA. This is about where teams get stuck. They kind of think, if we can't fix everything, then we should wait. And ultimately, that's not how momentum works. So action action can still be small and it can be meaningful. So just picking up on the earlier examples, it might be reviewing one journey, like your recruitment and onboarding process. It might be fixing one recurring document issue. It might be adding captions to key videos. So if you have a video which goes, "Hi, welcome to my website," or things you're doing on social media that doesn't yet have closed captions, you're potentially missing part of your audience there. So adding those could go a long way. It might be training one team. So a lot of people who approach or Accessible Me, for example, they are heads of learning, heads of HR, and they want to train their teams. And it's always interesting, they train their teams up, their teams get excited about accessibility, they understand, yes, it's the right thing we need to do. And then the sales teams are still going out without that awareness. They're not factoring accessibility into their considerations. And therefore, when they drop the price, or they take on and go, yes, we can absolutely do that by next week, when normally it would take us 2 or 3 weeks. All of a sudden you're setting your other team's choice. You're actually putting pressure onto your development team to cut corners, and unfortunately, that's where accessibility is one of those things that often gets cut. So if we can train various areas of your organization, not just the developers, but the people, your leadership team, to help them understand why this is important. Your sales team, so they know why accessibility needs to be part of the conversation. All of this can make a huge difference. And it might also be creating a clearer route for people to report bias. And if we take a look at the kind of one of our North Stars here at Accessible Me, if you imagine a young black up and coming female tech developer, she's unfortunately already got the odds stacked against her in the current society, just because of the color of her skin and the fact she was born female. If you look at statistically success in leadership, now if you imagine, unfortunately, she has an accident where she has damage to her sight, a hearing, and maybe a limb difference. We strive at Accessible, we strive for a world where she can still be the CEO of the #1 tech company on the FTSE 500. And when you work backwards and go, okay, what needs to change to make that happen? Well, because she's young, she still needs to get experience. So reviewing one journey, that might be where you're posting your job advertisements. It might be making sure you have a diverse panel on the section. The onboarding itself needs to be accessible, and we definitely need to do better at more than just the D&I training being accessible. How about the managerial training? How about the leadership training? One journey might not necessarily be an internal thing. It might be the consumer journey. I land on your website, I add something to my basket, and I can check out. That could be a physical product or something, or a training course. If people struggle to kind of go through that page, find what they need, check out easily, you're going to lose them to someone else. You're going to lose that fantastic applicant to your business. You're going to lose that customer, and people buy from people like us. So, if we don't see people like us with Vital Go, if all your team are kind of 18 to 30-year-old white men, and there's no difference in kind of silver hair, race, religion, head garments, are you going to feel like, hey, this is an organization where I might thrive, where I belong? And if there's no one like this in the marketing, are you going to feel like, hey, these are designing for products or services for people like me? I will feel welcome going to their restaurant, attending their hotel, or things like that. It's really important that we see people like us in the conversation. And when I say see us in that conversation, I mean driving things as well. Driving the discussion. So making sure if we are designing public spaces and go, oh, we're going to design the most accessible public park, that any kind of council has seen. If people with disabilities are missing from that conversation, or parents with young children, elderly who might be taking their grandchildren, if those are missing from the conversation, barriers are going to creep in at some point. And what's key is that something needs to change from this. So I can see in the chat here, don't promise what you can't deliver. Ask for feedback. And my caveat to that ask for feedback, when you ask for feedback, make sure it's done in an accessible way. If you're not asking the questions on your feedback form, or the feedback form itself isn't accessible, that might be one of the reasons why you're not getting that feedback in the first place. So, and again, I hear time and time again, no one's ever complained about the accessibility of our products and services. And it's because they're not asking the question, or I've gone on to the Google form or Microsoft form, and just there are barriers in place. They might have done drag and drop kind of things, or some kind of element where a multiple choice or something this simple would have been a lot more effective. The key is that, as I noted, is that something changes. It's not just what you say; it's about what people experience. So again, which of the areas are on screen now? And if I just run through them, reviewing one journey, fixing one barrier, training one team, updating one statement or roadmap, improving one template, or creating one reporting route. Which of these feels most realistic to your organization in the next 30 days? Again, you can feel free to pop that in chat or make your own notes. Just if you're not a decision maker in your organization, maybe you can go and take this to your manager or your leadership, or you can post about it on social media if this has resonated with you. What we'll do next is we're going to group these into kind of one of 4 areas. And this is because it helps us to celebrate progress without turning it into kind of random activity, a one-off type thing. Again, just looking at the chat. So feedback, also allowing people to engage in person or throughout current pathways, where you might meet them where they're at and in ways that can easily communicate and engage. I think that's a really important point, Annabelle, and thank you for sharing. And sometimes you are going to have to meet people on a one-to-one basis and make that easy to happen. That might be a phone call, it might be a video chat. So if your form has, for example, please leave your name, email, and phone number, and they're all required fields. Well, if somebody is deaf and hard of hearing and they see the phone number as a required field, they might not actually complete the form, especially if you've given them a no option to say, actually, I'm very happy to have a call with you, but it needs to be a video call so I can have the captions on or that I can lip read. These things make a difference. It might be you have a town hall and people aren't attending because they are neurodivergent or they're parents of young children. There might be a whole host of reasons why they don't join these community sessions. And one of the things I would also add, if possible, try and give people the option to give feedback anonymously. You'll find very much so that if it doesn't have to be attributed to kind of one person or feedback on them in some kind of negative way, they're more likely to be honest about what they struggle with. So, and if I take kind of an example of a workplace example, if you send out a HR survey to say, do you have any kind of accessibility barriers we can help you with, and you're asking for names and numbers, you might get a very different response to if you did an anonymous survey within your organization to say, with these internal things like the onboarding, finding your contracts or anything else, do you struggle with anything? And provide options. That may be multiple choice, multiple select, with another option where you can add your own and make that anonymous. I think if you were to A/B test the two, one that's anonymous and one that isn't, you're probably going to hear quite a difference. So the next session is on shout-outs, and this is where I do hope to hear from you if indeed you want to kind of pop things into chat or come off and mute, because this is the main kind of celebration section of today. So we're about to kind of use the 4 categories for the shout-outs, and this should hopefully keep the celebration useful. Because the point is, it's not just easy to say well done. The point is to kind of ask others what we can learn from it. So I'll run through the four first, and then we can kind of use this to drive the next section. So the first is content and communication. This might be accessible social content, such as adding captions to your videos or alternative text to your images. It might be clearer event pages. So some of you might have registered for this session through Eventbrite, or more thoughtful language. You might be going, you might take the post you're about to write and post and ask ChatGPT or Gemini or any other AI tool, how does this give me your feedback for tone? How do you perceive the tone of this message? Is it trauma informed design? If I'm writing celebrating Accessibility Awareness Day for Alcoholics Anonymous or a domestic abuse charity, the tone matters as much as the imagery and as much as the words. So think about the accessible content, not just for it being the right thing to do, but also in the way social media is heading. So I don't know how many of you kind of are geeky like me and research how things like what does well on Instagram, what does well on LinkedIn, but Instagram are moving away from using hashtags for discovery, and they are now looking at the alt text that you provide on your images to provide more images. And if you can imagine things like Google Images, how frustrating it is if you were to go, I want to find an image of, I don't know, a dog or an Alsatian, a Dalmatian, for example, and you get poodles and puppies and everything else that nothing to do with what you searched. How many of us look at hashtags on social media and go, okay, this one's relevant, but all of these aren't. I see it time and time again in wrestling posts, for example. The reason social media giants like Instagram and Meta are now looking at quality alt text is because it produces quality results. If that is, if it's accurate. The second one is learning and capability. So this might be staff training. It might be an internal webinar, or you get an external consultant in. It might be a learning resource. So a key takeaway aid that can be put on tables, or a conversation that helps people understand accessibility in practice. And our escape room is a fantastic example of that to drive some of those conversations that might not have ever happened. Third is systems and services, where teams review things that people actually use, and these can be your feedback forms, your journeys, whether that's the journey into an organization, your customer journey from finding out about you on social media, that post you've done on Instagram, to I'm actually attending your webinar, I'm attending your restaurant, booking at your hotel. It could be your accessibility statement, PDS, internal processes, or reporting routes. And fourth is culture and leadership. So this is about kind of ownership. Who owns accessibility in your organization? Is it on the shoulders of one individual, or are multiple people accountable for accessibility? If it is one person, what happens if that person leaves because they get their dream job at an accessibility or inclusion role? And suddenly you're back to square one. Or what happens if that person is in a meeting when somebody comes in needing that person or needing that service? It looks at leadership, also looks at about accountability, employee networks, leadership messages. So making sure leadership are present and kind of celebrating and backing the team, to being visible allies and advocates. And it might also be making accessibility part of how decisions get made. So for each shout out, if we can kind of just use kind of structure what they did, why it matters, and what others can learn. So just as an example, I want to highlight this because it's practical. It doesn't claim perfection, but it shows progress, and that gives me something that people can copy. And I think if I just take the chat what's going on there, Anna Gale's comments regarding not promising what you can deliver and on feedback has been celebrated by Sai, who says kind of well said. So just it could be as simple as kind of I I volunteered some information in the chat, and that was a meaningful thing as well. Feel free to use the chat if you wish to do so. If you'd like to speak, feel free to use that raise your hand feature. You can come off mute and you can speak as well. If you're not comfortable with that, that is also absolutely fine. And go, if I can invite you to speak.
Yeah, I started to type and thought, oh gosh, no. I was going to say last year I created a poster using AI for around beach accessibility, improving beach accessibility, and it quite ironic really. If anybody can see me, you can see that I have colour in my face. Quite ironic that I had images of people, the back of people looking out to sea, and I had people who picked me up. I mean, why I didn't spot this? Picked me up on, there was nobody of colour in the picture, so it's like I'll just write myself out of this. And also, it wasn't clear that some of those people may have, you know, may have disabilities, but recognising that there are also hidden disabilities. So that was really great feedback, and I got that on LinkedIn. I got that on
Yes.
LinkedIn for people I didn't know that just wanted to tell me I'd missed something, and I just found that really, really valuable.
So would you mind me asking, like, how did they give you that feedback? Did they do that in the comments, or did they kind of direct message you?
They, I think it was I think it was probably both. I think it was
Yeah,
probably personal because you don't have to air everything on
yeah,
public LinkedIn. I would rather go to people directly and give them feedback or something, because then you know it's kind of genuine. It's not kind of I'm trying
yes.
to up my kind of reach, you know. So I think it was both, to be honest, Michael.
And that's great. And much to your point, I think to anyone listening or kind of watching the recap video, too often I see kind of people tear organizations down who are doing good things. I've seen examples in the deaf community which would attack companies who are trying to do things with kind of AI and sign. Now, whilst I understand that might be a very personal example, especially if you're a child of deaf parents, or you're somebody who just relies on BSL or ASL and things like that. I very much kind of the persuasion of how we give feedback um, will affect how it is received. And so certainly when I see individuals doing quite interesting things, because quite often it's clearly AI generated, and if you don't have artistic talents like I don't, so, um, I think it's not unreasonable to use AI. But I think one of the interesting things to the point with AI is it's not necessarily it's trained on the web, so and everything else, and that comes for everything from kind of vibe coding AI apps, which often aren't accessible because the code on the web that is using isn't accessible in itself, down to kind of what we get across. And I very much do find if we don't actually tell the AI to consider people with different ethnicities or different religions, you know, and also to be consistent. One of the examples I created recently with, if I use that North Star example, was in 3 out of the 4 images that were kind of made up this kind of almost infographic style image. Um, the prosthetic was on the left leg, and in the fourth, for some reason, it had moved to the right. And obviously that's not a realistic example of suddenly someone's going to go through life, suddenly kind of regrow a limb that was missing or they never had. So there has to be that kind of element of respect, especially with kind of you creating images which are providing likeness. Another example I see of people doing great things on the accessibility front is sharing their top tips and then using some of those kind of not alternative tech, other ways of formatting the text on LinkedIn. So the things that make the text italic or bold on LinkedIn, ironically, the content which they're communicating, if you're able to read it, is fantastic. But if you're a screen reader user, we'll skip over any of that unusual formatting. So I think there are elements that people aren't necessarily aware of. Another one might be, calling out trauma-informed design, but then having poor color contrast and things like that. So, I think giving people feedback is always good, but try not to in a way that attacks them. Try and kind of go, hey, I love what you're doing. I love the message. Have you perhaps considered that not everyone can engage with this, which is a real shame, because what you're doing is so good, and I think more people could access it or amplify the message if they could kind of read it, hear it, or engage with it in some way. I did see the hand raised once more. Was there something additional you wanted to say? Because I don't want to.
Yeah, no, it was just you kind of mentioned a minute ago about hearing impairment.
Yes.
And it was just to say, I go to lots of meetings and networking meetings and things like that, and there's a real and I did a post because it's so easy to think that when you walk into a room, when the room is noisy, we've got a great event, right? We've got a great event, but hearing impairment is very much something that you might see somebody's hearing aids, but not everybody takes that direction because it feels, for some people it feels shameful. It feels like it's making me look old, and so there may be many people who don't wear hearing aids but who can't hear, and they may be the people who are nodding, but they can't actually hear what's being said, and that means that they aren't necessarily hearing the message that you want to communicate. Some of those messages could be could be life or death messages. It could be to do with health and safety, and they're nodding, but they haven't kind of heard you. But it was also to say that I've seen a few events recently where people have brought in people to do sign language, and that sends such a powerful message. That you are taking this seriously, and you want to make sure that your communication, which you've probably put loads and loads of effort into, and you know what you want to get out of it, that it's important that people receive it and can understand it.
Yeah, that's a vital point, and I think you've been celebrated with that in the chat, which I see from Emmy, who's joined us from the US. So hello, Emmy. So not everyone will provide feedback directly, but check in that support tickets too as well. So take it kind of, I think that links to the example, and your point earlier regarding a noisy event is one that's kind of seen as people are engaging. If I take learning technologies and other events that I attend, yes, it is great that people are engaging, but it's not necessarily the volume of noise that triggers someone with multiple neurodivergences like I do, with sensory overload, is the complexity of noise. So, and whilst as somebody with ADHD and autism and also with other conditions, whilst I can engage in that scenario for a period of time, it drains my mental and social battery quicker than anything else. So, and if I need to step out, I'm potentially missing, or not only missing the insights from the speakers, but the opportunity to feedback and have my opinion heard. So, all of these things matter. And the reason these actions matter is because accessibility isn't abstract. It affects real people trying to learn, trying to work, trying to communicate, and to apply and contribute and belong. Not only does it affect real people, it also, in a world with AI now and things like that, affects the bots. So Google's crawlers are effectively deaf-blind bots. And if you want to get your content seen and recognized by tools like ChatGPT and Gemini, it has to be machine readable. So if you're not providing the alternative text and the captions and everything else, the content might as well be invisible and might not be there. Now, I kind of want to bring this back to again, some real experiences. Because accessibility isn't just a technical standard, it affects whether people can understand information, it affects their ability to complete a task, and that task isn't just maybe completing their task at work. Imagine you're working your way through some e-learning and they can see the button that says click next to continue, but that button is grayed out because it's something they haven't done. Imagine you think you've completed the task and you can't find why, and how frustrating that is. maybe it's they can't join a meeting, or it's they can join the meeting, but because every example in the meeting you've kind of gone, comment in chat if you agree or disagree, or let us know your thoughts. And people are busy writing, and then the slide moves on, and the pace of the conversation is going more quickly than you can engage with. And if you have a speech impediment where I can't join the conversation at the same pace, or I have a condition which dyslexia or some other condition where typing, could be or typing accurately or quickly could be a disadvantage to me. It could be their ability to access learning, apply for a role, or feel like a system that wasn't designed for them in mind. So again, I'd love to just ask some quick questions, and I'll keep this tight because we're slightly behind it. So just think about, and you can again come off mute if you want to do so, or comment in chat. What does good accessibility feel like when it's done well? And those of you who have any kind of disability or medical condition, maybe it's a temporary disability, you fell and broke your wrist recently or as a child, and there's something you couldn't do, let's hear about your experiences when accessibility is done well. How does that make you feel? And the one way you could look at that is the kind of the opposite of when the accessibility hasn't been there. How has it made you feel? So when it's been missing, and it feels good, right? Another question is, what is one barrier organizations often underestimate? So and that kind of links to that first question. So here's what it feels like when it is done good well, but based on my conditions. And if I take my own examples of somebody who is neurodivergent, not just my own neurodivergent, I'm the parent of two wonderful children. Both have their own neurodivergent needs as well, and we might attend events which are family fun days. And the town is busy, it's thriving, and it's lovely to see. And you see the stalls like the hooker duck, the bouncy castle, and most systems have queuing systems. Where you've got, say for example, the bouncy castle or something else, you've got that constant running motor there. You've got people screaming on the waltzers that spin people around. You've got the hot dog stalls and everything else. And all of a sudden, that can cause overwhelm. And if your kid kind of goes, I'm struggling with the noise and gets overwhelmed and maybe aggressive, all of a sudden, then other parents in the queue or organizers look at you as if you're the problem. Whereas if you'd have had, for example, a ticketed system where you can kind of go up to the stand and go, okay, rather than having to queue, much like we had in COVID and saw in COVID, rather than queue now, come back a quarter to the hour and it'd be your session. You can avoid queues, much like the doctor's surgeries and things that have done. And third and finally, what would you like teams to do differently after GAAD, after Global Accessibility Awareness Day? So, so in working through these examples, we thought about, okay, what does it look like when it's done well? What's the barrier or frustration that we've seen? And ultimately, if an organization can follow that good example or help overcome the barrier, this is going to, it should drive some positive change. So not seeing any comments in chat there, but if I come back to the events organization again, so I when it's done well, there is a ticketing system in place, and the barrier is something overlooked. One thing I think one barrier organizations often underestimate is neurodiversity is a hot topic at the moment. People approach accessibility often going, I'd like you to speak about a neurodiversity organization. And inevitably things like open plan offices come up and they go, right, open plan offices is bad. And I go, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying open plan offices doesn't work for people who are neurodivergent. An open plan office might be a kind of safety net for somebody who is deaf and hard of hearing who relies on lip reading, and that kind of line of sight to be able to see people, good lighting there for us can make a big difference. And an interesting one is, imagine you are delivering a webinar or a conference. You've got your big screen up the front, and you know, because you've done a survey in advance about your audience, you're going to have somebody who needs the brightness turned up because they're going to struggle to see it otherwise, and somebody else who goes, "Oh, bright screens, they trigger horrific migraines for me, you know, and cause these headaches." What do you do as an organization when you know you've got both? Ultimately, you know, is speak to people, find out what they need, what adjustments can be made, and I'm hoping I'm not going to spoil the answer there. So I'm going to kind of read the example that's been popped in, you know, and then kind of come back to that. So I'm seeing the answers to those three questions: freedom to be yourself, to be valued for the impact you can offer, achieving outcomes working with others, playing to each other's strengths, regardless of any disabilities people might have. KPIs is a big one. I see in organizations, KPIs to get signups or something else when your team might really struggle with signups because that's not what they're good at, but they could thrive at delivering workshops, or they are the quickest to do something else. You know, when KPIs work against your employees, that's the problem. An answer to what organizations should stop doing after awareness days is pledges that sound good, but that are quickly forgotten. And to come up on the to answer that one, I think that's where I try and encourage people to have an accessibility statement on their website, if indeed they don't already have one. You know, not just to say, okay, we're amazing, we're this kind of inclusive employer, and we do all these things, but to recognize and go, okay, we're not perfect, but this is what we have done, and this is what we plan on doing, and by this time next year, so GAAD 2027, this is what we will have achieved. And when we come to visit GAAD 2027, if we haven't achieved it, but we can go, okay, we didn't achieve what we said, but that's because this other urgent thing come up, maybe a different thing, like we needed to install a ramp, and that's where our investment went. You know, so long as we can kind of justify, no, we didn't do it, but here's what we have done, and we have made progress. I think there should be some slack. But coming back to the screens example, because no one's taken on that challenge. Ultimately, have the brightness on, you know, allow people to have it, but then see if you can provide darkening glasses for the individual who relies on it, or give them that content in a different format. If you've already prepared the presentation and that's ready to go, maybe you can have a printed format, or you can allow them to follow along on their mobile device where they can darken the screen. You know, there are a number of quick wins where you can have both people winning. What I would say is to anyone who's kind of been thinking, contributing in the chat, and especially to you, Annika, who come off mute and spoken today, is I want to kind of thank you for the important points you have raised, because you know, all of these things remind us that accessibility isn't just about technical compliance. You know, it's not about the WCAG guidelines. It is about the experiences that people have both online and in real life. So and just looking again, running a women's friendship group, and for every event we want to be inclusive and accessible. So we include with the Eventbrite the question with photos and videos around how accessible the venue and activity will be. And that's an interesting example, because when I speak to hotels and estate agents and stuff like that who do lots on accessibility, photos of the rooms and videos of the rooms, you know, can go a very long way, especially if you follow up and have alternative text. So to say, for example, a bright room with large windows and stuff like that, Joe, might attract somebody who is blind and has low vision, not because somebody with blind and low vision sees in total darkness, but actually, you know, because they can kind of see things even if it may be blurry. So a bright room with lots of light can help me navigate, you know, or it might have a large garden, which might be great for my guide dog, or you know, things like that. You know, the alternative text and the images and the videos can make a really big difference. So So again, just throwing this out to my audience, what is one barrier you think your organization may be underestimating? You haven't got to put this one in chat. You just think to yourself, make the notes, but do pop it in the chat if you wish to do so. Essentially, at this stage in the webinar, what we've heard there is exactly why kind of the next 30 days, the next quarter matters, and the next year ahead. That's because Global Accessibility Awareness Day can create energy, but the energy fades unless it becomes structure. So after GAAD, or Global Accessibility Awareness Day, don't let that energy disappear. You can do one of 6 things or all 6 things. And if you're going to do something in order, this is the order I'd recommend. Firstly, capture what happened. What did you do? Who engaged? And what feedback came from that? Was it well received, or did you get feedback on what you could do better? Capture all of that. Secondly, identify what you've learned. So did you notice the gap, or did somebody else notice the gap? Did somebody raise a barrier that you weren't aware of, or maybe you were aware of but didn't have time to, and now you know how important it is? And do the team realize that they need more than just confidence to do something? They need permission, they need budget, they need other things that can help them succeed. Third, based on what you have done and what you've learned, pick one priority journey to do next. Not 10, one. Because if you can do one, you can celebrate and you can iterate on that. Fourth, assign ownership. So if nobody owns the next step, if that belongs to a team of people, or especially teams of people across the business, and there's nobody accountable on that racy document, it usually isn't going to happen. So, and I think I saw that earlier in the chat. Initiatives where people say they're going to do something and don't normally comes from a lack of ownership. Fifth, make that one improvement. It can be small, but it must be real. So adding alt text, adding captions is an improvement, a real improvement, something you can celebrate. Running your colors through a contrast checker and making sure you avoid the combinations that don't work is a meaningful next step. And then sixth, set the next checkpoint. So once you've celebrated that one area of success, iterate, go around that loop again. And that might be 30 days from now, it might be 60 days from now, or in your next leadership meeting. And again, just whilst we're here, I'd love to hear from you again, my audience. Which of the next steps do you think is missing in your organization right now, if any? The reason I ask is because once you know, your team, your leaders know what step is missing, the next question becomes what should happen next. And this is where things get practical ultimately. So for some organizations, the next move is reviewing that one journey. It could be the booking system. I'm looking to reserve a table in the restaurant, but there's no. Our restaurant has a step to get to the back, and we have no ramp. But we do have seating at the front. So we could say, do you have any access needs? Or something to that effect. It could be the checkout process. It could be the journey from finding you on social media to booking a course or joining the next webinar. Just one journey. For others, it might be training up one team, sales team, developers, or something to that effect. For some people, that might be an audit because they need evidence before they can actually make the decisions. For some people, it might be updating the accessibility statement or the roadmap, getting leadership buy-in, where empathy-led experiences might be more effective. And for some of you, you might not be sure still, even at this stage, and that's fine as well. So not sure yet is a perfectly valid answer, as long as that doesn't become a permanent state. If 30 days from now, 6 months from now, or a year from now, you're still not sure, that might be a lack of kind of proactiveness, or maybe it might be a money thing, a resource thing, an effort thing, or something else has come up. But try and do one thing and celebrate that. You can pop that answer into chat if you wish to do so, or just make your own notes. What feels most useful, the useful next step for your organization? And I can see, Sai, your comment in there. The key is, to kind of make sure you take that answer, especially if you have influence or you feel strongly about this. Take that back to your organization or your clients or your customers and feed that back. So, and here are 5 useful prompts you can do to go that. So these 5 questions are simple enough to take into your next team meeting. And I will share the slides, so don't worry about writing all of these down. That's absolutely fine. The first question is, what did Global Accessibility Awareness Day reveal that we shouldn't ignore? So have a look on social media today, see what others are doing. Many will be doing 10 top tips, 20 top tips. Here are things you should be doing now or tomorrow. Have a look at those. What have they identified? Secondly, which journey has the most friction? So if you know, for example, you have a store with tight aisles, and that causes friction for wheelchair users or mobility scooter users, fix that. If it's the ability to book simply because you have the phone numbers required field, fix that. Third, who owns that step? Because if you can put a name to it and you can follow up, that's going to help you as well. Fourth, what can you honestly say has changed? And fifth, where do we need support? And that last question is going to be an important one, because that support might mean training for your organization. And we know we need to do this, but we don't know how, so we can help you get there. That might mean an audit, so we look at your content, find the gaps. It might be a strategy session. Leadership don't know what they don't know, but get a consultant who does know and get them in. And it might be an experience like allyship or escape room to help people understand the barriers in practice. The point here isn't to guess, it's to kind of identify the next useful step. Again, just think about, if you're making notes, which of these 5 steps might be useful to ask internally. You might find it is all of them, in which case, we'll send that worksheet example where you can print something that isn't going to use all of your ink, and we can follow up. So Si, I can see your comment here. I've resonated with so much of the same thought of this pushing for young change makers in a youth cohort you're part of, which is fantastic. Keep on doing that. I was super happy to see the way they are eager to take a step forward to inclusion and accessibility. One of them even started a conversation with me on how to make their landing site more accessible, which is, again, great, because that's where most people who find your website through Google and everything else are going to land on your landing page, your homepage. So it's a great first step. Get your homepage accessible first and foremost, because that's where most people are going to go. And if you're not sure, look on Google Analytics, find and almost tackle it in that order. Most people, after the landing on your homepage, go to the About page. Okay, well, after we've done the homepage, let's do the About page next. Another page worth looking at is your Contact Us, because again, if that's not accessible, there's a problem there. So thank you so much for joining the session and to see me in action. Let's catch up after. I do appreciate your kind words, but I don't want to be kind of big-headed or anything else here. So before we close, I'd love to everyone to turn something into a small commitment. It doesn't need to be perfect; it just needs to be real. So complete the session in the chat if you feel happy to. Before the end of June, we'll do what? Are we going to review one journey? Are you going to train that team? Are you going to update the statement, improve one of your templates, that PowerPoint template you always use, the document template, your email template, maybe your social media template? It could be a better reporting route or taking maturity snapshot. Small commitments matter because they create movement. And movement is ultimately what keeps accessibility alive after Global Accessibility Awareness Day. We are at time now, so I appreciate some of you will need to drop off. And if you have joined today, I want to say thank you. Thanking you for, and to help you choose and prioritize the next step, there's one more thing I just want to take you away with after today. And that's the maturity snapshot. So to close, the most useful steps in your organization could take now is the maturity snapshot. It's designed to help you identify the most useful thing your organization could be on next. So it's not going to come at you and go, here's everything you could be. It could be ownership, training, an audit, a journey review, all that leadership buying. And once you have that clarity, your next step becomes a lot easier. So again, thank you for being part of today's session. Thank you for caring enough about accessibility to join both now and beyond Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And ultimately, where support is useful, accessibility can help you through any of these, be that training, be it audits, especially with our new partners, Accessibility Shield out in the States. Our Armour platform is fantastic. Do join one of our future allyship sessions if you can. If you haven't got a team or an organization that you can run this with, we do have open days on the first Thursday of every month. They are 4:30 to 6 p.m. in the UK, again, to accommodate for the time differences for our friends overseas in the United States and beyond. But ultimately today, just start with that snapshot, and I'll send the link out after. I myself don't have that same hard stop that some of you might. So if you are leaving us, thank you so much for joining. But I am here to take a couple of questions if anyone does have any. So again, let's an opportunity to put those questions in the chat. Come off mute, and if you have run out of time today, then simply send me an email. You can email me using my contact. You can message me on LinkedIn. So let's make sure we are connected there, and let's keep that conversation going. With that in mind, I'm going to stop the recording in a moment because some people do prefer to ask questions not on a recorded session, and I want to foster that sense of psychological safety. So whether you joined us today or whether you're watching on catch up, on YouTube or any other platform this might have been embedded in, thank you for joining and take care. And I'm wishing you all the best and have an amazing Global Accessibility Awareness Day, both now and beyond. Thank you, Sai. Yeah, let's absolutely champion inclusive change together. Let's see how we can support each other. We've expanded in the United States recently with Kansas City Women in Technology, and if you're joining from kind of India or other areas as well, we're keen to support you and to make that happen. So let's absolutely keep that happening. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording there.